Thanks everyone for being here today. This is the last of our Lexus and Whitewall Art and Innovation series here at Design Miami we're super excited about. Today we will have the conversation Electrification and Beyond, how tech is shaping what comes next. We'll discuss how designers are harnessing technology to achieve a vision for a more sustainable future. For the automotive industry, that means a road to electrification. For architectural area, that could mean prefab homes or adaptive reuse of historical spaces. So we'll talk about how technological innovations change consumer preferences and ideals. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by our panelists, Yves Behar, Jermaine Barnes, Bolain, and Celine Lee, and moderator, Tamara Warren. I'll give a brief intro for everyone. Jermaine Barnes is the principal architect of Studio Barnes and assistant professor and the director of the Community Housing and Identity Lab, CHILL, at University of Miami of Architecture. Barnes's practice investigates the connection between architecture and identity, examining architecture's social and political agency through historical research and design speculation. His installation On, in partnership with Lexus and UMiami, is here at Design Miami. Please go check it out. Yves Behar, founder and CEO of fuseproject, is a designer and entrepreneur who believes that integrated product, brand, and experience design are the cornerstones of any business. Behar has pioneered design as a force for positive social and environmental change. Bolain is global head of marketing and public relations for Lexus International. Bolain oversees marketing globally for the brand, including development and strategic direction for Lexus, along with coordinated approach to marketing globally in 90 markets. Celine Lee is a senior lead designer responsible for color and trim design at CALTY Design Research. Lee joined CALTY in June 2011, working on both concept and production vehicles for Toyota and Lexus brands. Her responsibilities also include researching North American consumer lifestyle and design trends. And our moderator today, Tamara Warren, is the founder of Le Car, a personalized car shopping platform developed by journalists. She has written for over 140 publications, including Whitewall, as well as the New York Times, Elle, Esquire, and Vox. Tamara is the former transportation editor and senior transportation reporter at The Verge. And I will kick it off to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie, and so excited to be here with you to talk about one of my favorite topics, how do we get from here to there, specifically thinking about electrification. And we just have an amazing group of big minds here to talk about, I think, areas that seem disparate but are connected, because we have people who design spaces and products and places and the vehicles that will move us there and develop the strategy on taking us there. But what I would like to start off of is to think about the responsibility that this involves and how you think about designing for the future and shaping it. And what is it like to take on that role? So let's kick it out with Germaine here.
I think it's a very difficult proposition because when you're in the now, you're really completely absorbed with sort of a self-preservation type mode of understanding the built environment, because it's here, it's tactile. Like, you can see what's happening around you. You understand that it's rain or it's flooding. You see these things. It's hard to project forward. It's hard to understand how the world will be 100 years from now or 200 years from now. So unfortunately, there's a huge disconnect between generations, because it's hard to put yourself in the position. It's more of a, we're fine now, why should I care as much in the future? And I think that's why it's important to have people like on this panel that aren't thinking that way and are understanding that there's generations of people that we're affecting and that we're teaching and that we're helping, and that they deserve an environment, they deserve production, they deserve a world that is just as viable as the one that we currently inhabit.
So for me, we're always lucky to be able to look 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 years ahead. And the challenge is to be able to take those risks. It's hard to take those risks, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a designer, because you're out in the open. People see what you're doing, and it's inherently experimental. you inventing a world, you're trying to tap into what people don't even know that they want. They don't even know that, this is exactly what they want, but they have this pent-up demand, this pent-up desire. And I think what's most interesting to me as a designer is to find these solutions that allow people to move forward, that allow them, that you sort of create an opening for them to adopt a new type of consumption or a new experience. And they will thank you forever for that, because they will remember that was the first time I realized I could do this in this way. I could change this habit, and I could, move forward. And I think it's the central role of a designer. It's not so much to iterate and create things that are, kind of slowly evolving. It's rather to put propositions out there that really move the culture and allow people to evolve themselves.
So let me just add, so many of the things Yves said, I totally agree with this notion that it's incumbent on a brand to really be thinking for the consumer of the future, because I think the consumer can't spend as much time thinking about it as we can, and maybe we have more insight than they may have. From our industry perspective, normally we're driven by societal trends. And so, it's easy enough to look at societal trend, but then when you compound that by the idea that we're on sale in 90 different markets around the world and recognize that those markets are all different, it's rare that we can find one trend that applies everywhere. But every now and then, there's something big that comes along that is more global, and I think that's where, this push toward electrification that you feel accelerating right now with this ultimate goal of some sort of carbon neutrality feels like finally there's a global push towards something we can all embrace.
As we move on to electrification era, actually this new architecture of electric vehicle allow us a lot more space to work with and then design freedom. So it is a new challenge, but at the same time, it's an amazing opportunity for us to offer the new user experience to our customers, responding to their expectation of future mobility. But at the same time, we feel responsible to create our product to benefit the better future for our next generation. So as a CMF designer, which is color, material, and finish designer, we're trying to make an approach, make more holistic approach to sustainable design, sustainability. So we're trying to investigate how to make our practice to be more circular. And then we're looking into the ways to build our vehicle with the more sustainable resources with less impact on design, impact on environment. And also we're trying to think about what we should do with the end of life of our products.
Thinking about specifically that kind of input and action, I guess, is a great segue to talk about the Lexus LFZ, which is a concept car. A concept car predates the production cars that we see on the street. It's where the design studios really show their imagination, forward thinking. Brian, if you could share a bit on how that particular concept embodies how we think about the carbon neutral future, I think that would be really interesting to hear about.
Yeah, sure. So the LFZ electrified was a concept we introduced about 6 months ago. And so if you go to the Lexus installation here, you'll see kind of this wireframe outline that Germaine's brilliant team at University of Miami put together for us. But the LFZ, Lexus has always been involved in electrification, right? We've been in the hybrid business for 16 years, but like many companies, we're shifting now full force toward battery electric future. And so we created the LFZ as a way to represent that shift. And if you were kind of in any of our internal meetings, you'd hear us chattering about the next chapter of Lexus and what that represents. And the LFZ sort of embodies a lot of that because, what you see is, more flexibility in the way we can design a product, the way it looks. But important to us also, we can really adjust the way it feels. We can adjust the experience you have when every single system in the car is electrified and therefore working better together. So the advent of more technology beyond just electric, is really coming together in sort of a wonderful way. And that's really what LFZ represents for us, and we hope that's what our installation here can represent to our audience.
Germaine, you are now thinking about electric cars in this work. Do you want to share a bit about the process behind that and what impact that you think it should have?
Sure. So I love cars. I love being driven in cars. I'm not really a fan of driving them. So I never knew that when a car brand says they're creating a new platform, that really means the entire thought process between the brand, the mission, the tectonics of the entire vehicle are all developed over a significant amount of time, right? These are things that I just didn't know. I thought you just get in the car, you put in the key, you turn, you go, like the end. And that's like a very Americanized way of it because I'm not even using a manual. It's literally just put it in, go, I'm out of here. But then once I learned about this entire process that it takes and the amount of care and sort of attention to detail that it requires, I had to find a way to celebrate that in the installation, right? Like you have amazing craftsmen, amazing designers, people who've been trained their entire lives to design these beautiful objects. And so how can we celebrate it beyond a person like me who ignorantly just gets in the car? And they might say, oh, that looks really cool, but that's the end of it, right? So the wire frame really highlights those very important sort of moments that the craftsmen put into this car that is so beautiful. And then once they mentioned that they wanted a sort of futuristic approach to this, you're always a bit worried that it becomes too overwhelming for the visitor. And like, do I really want to see myself in this, or is it just too far and it's not tangible enough? So we thought about bringing in more relatable elements like the swing, like benches, like very delicate lighting would be a very approachable way to do the installation so that it's not only those who may be car aficionados that understand what they're looking at, but a regular layperson like myself who may just happen to walk past the booth can still engage with the installation at a one-to-one scale because it's the real size car that's in the show. So if you want to know, will this fit in my garage? Pull out your tape measure or do what we do and pace it off with your feet. You have a pretty good understanding of what's actually there in the space.
And then thinking about the future, obviously, there's no better way to think about the future than education and working with your students on it, right? Tell me how they became involved in the process.
Yeah, I'm very, very blessed to be a professor. It's not something that's very easy to attain. And I was always taught that you pay it forward, right? You don't stop the bucket yourself. You open the back door and let more people in. So when Lexus gave me the opportunity to do this proposal, I said to them, I'm also a professor. Would it be okay if we have some of my team also work on the proposal? And they were completely open to that because they also understand that you need this electrified future to also include the people who will be driving the cars or being the future designers of the brand. So I have a full team that was here earlier today that helped envision the swing, that helped envision the furniture. And they hung out with Instagram influencers today, which I'm sure they were super happy about and all smiles. This is also their final week of presentations, so they get a chance to break before the holiday. So I think all of these things serendipitously work together because the brand's moving forward. I think the young people are moving forward. And to have those two collide in a very peaceful and harmonic sort of moment is great for me.
Thanks. When we think about electrification, it extends far beyond just the automobile, right? Like the micromobility movement, the scooter movement. And Yves, your work with the Unagi scooter and is also another way to reimagine and think about a carbon neutral future. Could you share a bit about that process and how that intersects with your long, incredible work in product design?
Yeah, so I started working with Unagi about a year ago. It's a startup based in Berkeley, and they're very successful with their first model, and we've designed the next model. And what I'm hoping is that will be the vehicle of Design Miami next year, because being stuck in traffic, going from place to place, it's so much easier to do on a scooter. So We made it, very safe. It's got dual suspension. It's something you own, by the way. It's not a rental scooter, which means that you can design it much more as a personal experience because you can actually fold it. You can carry it to your workplace. You don't leave it outdoors once you own it, and you can make it lightweight. There's all these different ways to kind of think about micromobility when it's not a rental model. The other thing that's interesting is we're the first to make it a smart scooter, so it has actually an ADAS on board. It has a collision detection mechanism. It will alert you if there is an upcoming pothole or an obstacle. I've been very excited about electrification, so much so that my electric car I purchased 10 years ago. So I've had an electric car for exactly 10 years and about a month. And initially I wanted to be, the example. I wanted to take a risk. I wanted to support, a company that was putting this new idea, this new type of product forward. But what's been amazing to me is not just the green credentials, obviously. 10 years of driving an electric car gives you some, but really what's kind of transformed my thinking around it is it's much more convenient than any other type of vehicle. In the last 6 years, my car has not been in the garage once. That's 6 years after you get, your warranty runs out, right? And everybody knows what happens. You buy this car, expensive or not. After 4 years, miraculously, it breaks down. right as your warranty runs out, right? And so having a car or a boat or a bicycle or a scooter, you just name it, that will survive and will last so much longer, that is also a significant amount of lower carbon impact, right? Because changing cars every 3 years or 4 years is, doesn't matter if they're electric or not, is not exactly the sustainable solution. Keeping a car for 10 years plus is remarkable, especially if you drive an electric car. So I think electrification will win, not just on the fact that it's a better experience, better interiors, smarter, but also on the fact that it is so convenient. It doesn't break down.
I mean, that's so right? You think about carbon neutrality as a goal, and once you set up those parameters and you pursue the course of electrification, it also unlocks so many other possibilities as designers. Brian, do you have any thoughts to kind of add on to that?
Well, I have to say that, first of all, we have very high durability and dependability ratings, so we're not going to break down after 4 years. Just going to say that.
I didn't look at you.
You did not. You did not. You were thinking of many other competitive brands. The one thing I wanted to add, actually, on this notion, because as we're all learning about EVs, for example, they're actually a lot of fun, right? They're fast, they're quiet, they're super responsive. But there's also other ways that we're looking at this notion of carbon neutrality in a bigger picture. Pure EV may not be the only solution. So one thing our company is working on, for example, is hydrogen combustion. So not hydrogen used in fuel cells, that's very complicated, but hydrogen in a combustion engine that still produces very little in the way of emissions, but gives you more that visceral feel for people who really love a traditional driving experience. And there will always be some of those kind of enthusiast level people who want that. So I think it's really important we recognize that carbon neutrality is the goal. EV is one way to get there, and there are some other ways that we're also exploring.
And when you think about that, Celine, as far as your work in trends and really thinking about the future, what are some other areas that you look at for inspiration when you think about how electrification will change the face of luxury going forward?
In general, luxury trend-wise, luxury market is transforming, basically. So in my recent research about luxury market, one of the data says that more than 50% of luxury buyers thinks that the meaning of luxury has changed. And then also many experts says that we're facing the new era of luxury. So as society and culture and industry changes, the meaning of luxury is also being redefined. And while traditional luxury is more about opulence, heritage as a status symbol, new luxury is more about the state of feeling luxury through the meaningful individuation. And so as luxury buyers are changing. So basically, the population of ultra rich in the world is growing rapidly because of all this expansion of industries and on the new money and old money. So basically, you see a lot of different mentalities and personas based on their net worth and the source of wealth, education, ages, and cultural background. So I believe that luxury market is being more micro-segmented, and then Lexus as one of the established luxury brand, I think we have to approach to that trend with more customized approach to each segment. So some of the interesting trends in the luxury market that I found recently is one of them is more essential luxury, which means that luxury is becoming more inconspicuous, unlike before. So the big part of the luxury buyer actually choose comfort over opulence because they don't need the signifier for luxury anymore. So they choose the material and product that's more satisfying for their well-being and an essence of daily life. And another big trend is experiential luxury. So I think that everybody is familiar with that kind of trend. So true luxury is more about experience over product. So private, exclusive, and well-curated experiences are in high demand in the market. So for example, Four Seasons, a private jet vacation package, those are in high demand because of their highly exclusive itinerary and with top-notch services. So whenever they release a new itinerary for the season, it sells out right away. And then also another example is that race over the space travel. So despite the multi-million dollars ticket for one single trip, there's a months and years long wait list for that. So this kind of trend tells us that where the luxury market is gearing towards in the future. And lastly, sustainable luxury is one of the most important thing in the luxury market. So this luxury buyer, luxury customers wants to be a co-creator of the better future. So they believe that true luxury is to contribute for bettering society and environment. So those are the significant trends I see in the market right now.
Germaine, as a car enthusiast, but now someone who is intersected with the car design studio and thinking about this, how do you think about electric cars, infrastructure, and how that impacts your work, thinking about community and architecture and creating the spaces of the future?
Yeah. So, allow me to be as honest and frank as possible, because as a black architect designer that does work in vulnerable communities, many of those communities have a very sort of wrought history with the car, because many of those neighborhoods were completely destroyed by the automobile, right? Like we see highways that fracture neighborhoods over and over and over again because of cars. And then we see massive highway infrastructure that's being built that also fracture these neighborhoods and stuff. So when you think about the net negative that does from a building perspective, just the amount of concrete that exists in that process and the emissions from these cars is so difficult for the quality of life of people that live in these neighborhoods, because you have these massive highways like I-95 that just becomes a parking lot for exhaust pipes. And the people that live there are just inhaling all these terrible fumes into their bodies. And then when we have global pandemics, it accelerates everything. And then we sit around and we wonder why the same type of marginalized people are at risk, right? So when I think about an electric future, I think about the fact that at the very least, from an environmental standpoint, we're able to mitigate a lot of those harmful pathogens that come into these people that live in these neighborhoods, right? We already have issues with not enough trees that are planted in these vulnerable communities. We don't have enough shade. So when you're positioning your brand as one that's understanding the harmful ways that the harmful things that we do to society and to communities, and then acknowledge we have to stop doing this and do something else and pivot, it makes me excited because then I know that with the privilege that I have, I'm able to better advocate for those who live in these vulnerable neighborhoods to say some things might change. And as I mentioned before, it's hard to get people to understand 30, 40 years in the future of once we get more cars on the road that are like this, we're able to remove a lot of the harmful things that we've done in the past, right? So it becomes a very, very difficult situation to try to navigate. But I think when you have a brand that's willing to push it forward, when you have students that aren't jaded yet and are still super excited about living in a world that has potential, you have amazing opportunities to then design and present innovative things like, say, a scooter that might also be an alternative mode of transportation that also promotes healthy living, that again, with all of those other issues, creates a much better environment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything you said there. I do feel, in addition, the urban landscape needs to, the sort of urbanism that's been centered around the car, almost exclusively around the car, and needs to that pendulum that needs to swing back. And we've seen during COVID a lot of streets being transferred to, to becoming carless neighborhoods with outdoor space, restaurants that are moving outdoors, and that gives you a sense of what a city could be like if it's really thought for its citizens first and the car second. Transportation is important. People going from A to B is important, but there's a lot of other ways to get around a city. I know with our studio in San Francisco, I would say probably 60% of the people, 60 to 70% of the people who will commute by bike, public transportation, scooter to work instead of taking a car. And that transition is a healthy one, for cities. There's always room for the car, obviously, but I think the urban environment has a lot to go for that pendulum swing to get back to people and people's lives, everyday lives being the real focus of the way a city is designed.
Yeah, I have to add on that. I couldn't agree more because I think, we've always talked about our businesses, the automotive business. We now refer to ourselves as a mobility company because the notion in the future is providing mobility for everyone who wants it. So our parent company is actually taking on the construction of an entire little city in Japan that's called Woven City. And it's purely being developed as sort of a learning opportunity for our company to understand how the various modes of transportation and a smart city and autonomous vehicles and so on can interact and kind of create this betterment that I think we're all looking for in the longer term future.
I agree all those comments, and then I couldn't agree more, but like Brian, but then I want to bring in some more soulful approach to that question. So actually, this whole sustainable movement was driven by our necessity and urgency. But at the same time, during this practice, it gives us to an opportunity to rethink of meaning of life and society and our relationship with nature. So I see this kind of interplay between social necessity and cultural aspect of it and creating synergy. So actually, a few years ago, we went to Japan to research takumi, which is traditional Japanese craftsmanship. And then we learned a lot about Japanese culture and the Japanese cultures. And then we learned that there are more than 20,000 stores and shops that are over 100 years old in Japan. And there are hundreds of stores that are older than 500 years. And then those are mostly carried on as a family business over like 10 to 15 generations. So we found that it's fascinating how much Japanese culture values the time and legacy, put a lot of effort to carry on over generation beautifully. So I think it's kind of spiritual sustainability, and then that is deeply embedded in Japanese culture and takumi, which is one of our core value of Lexus design. Then also, when I talked to one of the youngest successor of Takumi business, it was interesting to hear that him saying he's trying to embrace this new technologies to evolve their Takumi legacy to make it more relevant to modern society and appealing to modern aesthetic. So it was very interesting and made me thinking it's very exciting to see how the social necessity and then this cultural aspect and then this technology even kind of placed together, merged together, and then create a synergy by influencing each other to create the future. So that is, yeah, my answer.
I mean, thinking about the future is daunting, but discussions and collaboration and going across different fields helps us work our way through it, right? But when you think about the future from where you're all sitting now, I mean, how do you find that optimism? We're in tough, these are challenging times we're in. There's many ways of looking at the future, and designers, I think, have to be optimistic because you're imagining something new. You're imagining something conceivably better. And some of that means reflecting on your past, and like we'll talk about the fact that Yves has a book signing right after this that you can kind of look over his to many decades of work in product design, but really thinking all of you, how do you find that inspiration to keep going when sometimes it can feel a little confusing or uncertain?
My true feeling is that it's the present that's daunting. It's the present that really kind of gives me serious anxiety, both from an environmental or political standpoint. I think the future, on the other hand, is full of possibilities, and we have much more of a we know where we need to go, and what we need to find is the support for real change, for fundamental change, for a transformation that is going to be radical, and a transformation towards a low carbon footprint or a no carbon footprint environment, a social environment that is more just. Those things for me are, you can only think of this in a positive way, because it's positive work that needs to happen moving forward. So if you're okay taking the risks and sometimes failing, I think the future feels a lot more welcoming and less daunting than the present.
I don't know if it's come across yet, but I'm a bit of a nerd. So for me, the future is plentiful because I have all these crazy ideas inside of my head that people haven't given me money to explore yet. And so with projects like this, when they believe in your vision to then imagine something that maybe even they didn't think was possible with some of the work, that excites me. It excites me a lot. I mean, I'm always imagining myself as like a 70-foot tall superhero fighting crime as I'm walking down the street. So people are like, Jermaine, why do you smile so much? Because like in my head, I never lose a fight. And so as I'm working through like these types of thoughts and everything, I try to embed this in the way that I teach, so that my students feel empowered, so that they're able to keep that imagination, because that's how we get the cool stuff. If you're wrought and just like sunken and mirrored and just being annoyed and pissed off all the time, which is valid, because there's a lot of people that are extremely marginalized in this world, and they have all of the rights in the world to just say, you know what, I don't want to be optimistic today. I've had a really, really shitty day, and I just want to acknowledge that, and I want to work through that and I want to go forward. But I think the more that we open the door for diverse audiences, we get innovation that way. Because then we're no longer pushing forth the singular identity that gives us the same tropes over and over again. So when we open that up and we have panels and we have people and we have designers and we're giving them platforms and we're not taking away their creative agency, we're just saying, here's the possibility, here's the platform, run with it, and we will support you. Then you get really amazing stuff, right? Like that's when you get the stuff that's powerful, that's long lasting, that makes someone think, I want to be a designer too, or I want to be an architect too.
And I guess I would just add to that you know, the future sort of, I get why the future creates anxiety for some people because there's an unknown aspect to it, but yet it's ours to create, and creating something new is, I think, always very exciting and a dynamic process. The way I see it in our business certainly is there's an acceleration of change happening enabled by technology that we simply didn't have access to not that many years ago, and I think that's, you know, kind of an exciting thing. And the other, in my head, the other way I think about this is, why would I ever want to go backwards? Like, I don't want to go back to 1962. Wouldn't I rather go ahead? You know, so I think the future, yeah, it's daunting, but it's exciting.
I feel the same as Brian. So whenever we have a challenges, it kind of worries me in the beginning, but then as I accept it and try to explore it, and then at the end when we find the right answer for the better future, that always makes me really rewarding, feel really rewarding. So I think the facing the challenges and then try to face it and then try to explore with it and then find practically find a solution, that will be the positive side of the future. Yeah.
And just before we wrap up, I would love to hear what each of you is working on that we can look forward to seeing, to supporting your work. If you just want to share what's coming up, if you have something at the fair, I mean, obviously in the studio you can't share far into the future because, you know, car designers live in the future, right? So that would be a great place to end on.
If you haven't seen the installation, please go check it out. The furniture is meant to be sat on. The swings are meant to be swung on. Take photographs, take selfies, tag Lexus Electrified so that we can all see. There's an Instagram filter that also electrifies you as well. Like, fully immerse yourself into it. I don't think I need to run off the things that I'm working on at the moment because I think we should celebrate where we are now and celebrate the work that's maybe 100 feet away. And let's check that out.
I will. I'll come swing on that. I'll come swing on that swing. And yes, please come at 2 p.m. to the Collector's Lounge. I'll be giving some books away and signing them if you want me to.
Oh, they're free?
They're free.
Oh, okay.
They're free,
I'm
man.
there.
They're free. They're heavy though. You'll have to pay with some muscles. I'm personally excited about public transportation projects that we're working on. I think seeing the transformation of the car is one thing. Micromobility is another, and public transportation is the future. There's an expression that I love, which is, you don't measure the success of a society by how many poor people take public transportation, but whether rich people take public transportation or not. And that's a future I would like to see.
Yeah, so for us, you know, we're like every, I think, respectable brand, we're constantly trying to reinvent and try to reimagine ourselves. And what pieces of the Lexus brand from our history do we want to keep going that are familiar and kind of appreciated by our audience, but also where can we surprise? Where can we add some delight, some innovation, higher levels of engagement than before? So I think for anyone who feels like they fully understand the Lexus brand, over the next 2 to 3 years, we'd love to reintroduce ourselves to you because you're going to see quite a transformation happening product by product. And electrification is just one piece of that change.
So I'm so sad that I cannot talk about any of my project I'm working on because there's so many exciting stuff that I'm working on. So as Brian mentioned, the future mobility is not only the transportation taking us from point A to point B. So it's much more than that. So when it comes to luxury automotive design, I think it's much more personal. So the car will be considered as a extension of home or office or lounge. So I think the future mobility that we're working on right now, it will be much more personal and customizable and exciting to fit into all this individual lifestyle. So pretty soon coming up.
Well, I certainly feel much more excited about the future after listening to all of you. And thank you to each of you for taking the time out to be here, and to Lexus and Whitewall and Design Miami, and wishing you all a fantastic future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.